ever had one of those evenings where you genuinely intended to spend time with God? You had your Bible out, you had a journal ready, but you thought, I will sit down and unwind for 10 minutes first. 2 hours later, you are still on the couch. You have scrolled through hundreds of videos you will not remember tomorrow. You feel numb, you feel drained, and that familiar wave of guilt washes over you as you finally turn off the screen and go to bed. We usually refer to this as a lack of discipline. We call it bad time management. We buy planners. We set screen time limits on our phones. We tell ourselves that a better schedule will fix the problem. But what if I told you you do not have a time management problem? What if you are losing a deeply spiritual war simply because no one told you that you were standing on a battlefield? Today we're going to look at a story from the Old Testament that will completely change how you see your daily distractions. We're going to name the enemy, and I'm going to show you exactly how to stop going quiet on God and start fighting back. If you find yourself constantly pulled away from what matters, I want you to look at the story of Nehemiah. Nehemiah was given one assignment: rebuild the ruined walls of Jerusalem. It was massive work, tedious work, physically exhausting day after day, and the enemies of Israel, men named Sanballat and Tobiah, were determined to see it fail. But here's what I want you to notice. They did not show up with an army, not at first. Instead, they came with mockery, with threats, with noise. Their entire strategy was to get the workers to stop looking at the wall and start looking at them. So what did Nehemiah do? Did he tell his people to put down their tools and go spend the day in prayer? No. Listen carefully. Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 17 and 18. Those who carried materials did their work with one hand and held a weapon in the other, and each of the builders wore his sword at his side as he worked. I need you to sit with that image for a moment. They did not stop laying bricks. They did not abandon the wall. They just refused to be caught unarmed while they did the ordinary work in front of them. They lived in a state of constant, quiet readiness. Now I want you to think carefully about how Sanballat and Tobiah actually operated, because we tend to picture spiritual enemies as something obvious, something you would recognize immediately. We imagine a villain who arrives wearing a sign, but that's not how these men worked. They did not attack the wall directly. They sent letters, they spread rumors, they invited Nehemiah to a meeting that sounded completely reasonable and important, designed to pull him just far enough away from the wall for the progress to quietly stall. And when that didn't work, listen to what Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 11 records as their actual strategy. Before they know it or see us, we will be right there among them and kill them and put an end to the work. The plan was not force. The plan was proximity. Get close enough, quiet enough that the builders wouldn't even sense the threat until the work had already stopped. Does that not describe your favorite distraction perfectly? You don't open Netflix at 9 o'clock at night or pick up your phone or pour that extra glass saying, I'm about to waste 2 hours and feel spiritually hollow. You reach for it to unwind, to check one thing, one small, reasonable, innocent thing. And before you realize what has happened, you look up and the wall has stopped being built. The enemy has always been most dangerous when he is most subtle. He doesn't need a frontal attack when distraction will do the same work. Your daily life, your job, making dinner, taking care of your children, driving to work, that's your trowel. That's the wall you're building brick by brick, whether you realize it or not. But if you're only holding a trowel, the enemy will distract you until the wall crumbles. The Apostle Paul names what this looks like from the inside. Galatians chapter 5, verse 17, for the flesh desires what is contrary to the spirit, and the spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other. There's a war happening inside of you right now. Your flesh, your human nature, your hunger for instant comfort, for stimulation, for anything that makes the discomfort stop, wants the exact opposite of what your spirit is reaching for. And the enemy doesn't need to destroy your life to win this war. He doesn't need to ruin your marriage or collapse your career. He just needs to hand you something that keeps you numb for 4 hours every night, so that you never once pick up your sword. You can't feed your flesh all day and expect your spirit to feel anything by evening. So what does it actually look like to hold both the trowel and the sword right now inside the life you already have? Because I think we made spiritual warfare sound like something that only happens in a prayer closet at 5 in the morning with a candle burning. And for most of us, people with jobs, with children, with full and demanding lives, that image alone is enough to make us feel like we're already too far behind to begin. But that's not the Nehemiah model. The builders were not told to stop their work. They were told to keep doing their work and stay armed while they did it, which means your commute is a battlefield. Your lunch break is a battlefield. The 30 minutes before you fall asleep tonight is a battlefield. These are the margins of your day. And what you reach for in those margins, what you feed, what you refuse, determines the condition of your spirit far more than any single conference or retreat ever will. Holding the sword in the margins looks like this. The first 60 seconds you wake up, before the screen, before the noise, you give those to God. That's the sword. Silence on your drive instead of filling every second. Not because noise is evil, but because a sharpened spirit needs quiet the way a blade needs a whetstone. That's the sword. The moment you feel your flesh rising, that pull towards distraction, towards numbing, towards anything but stillness, you pause. You pray before you obey the craving. That's the sword. You're not quitting the wall. You're learning to build it with a weapon in your hand. Here's the hard truth at the center of this war. Whatever you feed will grow. Whatever you starve will die. If you want your spirit to be strong, you can't simply resolve to read your Bible more. Good intentions don't win wars. You have to actively starve the flesh. You have to pick up the sword. And fasting, real fasting, is one of the sharpest weapons available to you. Most people think fasting is an old religious rule about skipping meals, but fasting is not a rule. Fasting is a declaration. It's your flesh screaming for what it wants and you saying clearly and deliberately, not today. That same muscle you train over food, you can train over your screen, over the next episode, over the scroll, over every small comfort your flesh demands before your spirit has been fed. When you feel that pull towards your favorite escape in the checkout line, that's your flesh demanding to be fed. When you feel the push toward one more episode instead of sleep, that's the enemy standing quietly at the wall, waiting for you to put down your sword. Starving the distraction means feeling that urge and saying no. It means sitting inside the discomfort instead of escaping it. It means letting the silence arrive and taking it to God instead of taking it to whatever numbs you fastest. The silence is not emptiness. The silence is where your spirit gets sharp. So how do we fight this week? I'm not asking you to throw your television out the window, delete every app, or overhaul your entire life overnight. We don't begin with perfection here. We begin with grace in the margins, small, faithful movement in the ordinary moments that everyone else overlooks. Here's your challenge. Identify your number one numbing distraction, the thing you reach for when you don't want to think, when you don't want to feel, when you'd rather not sit with what God might be trying to say. Starve it for 24 hours, just one day. When the urge rises, and it will rise, recognize it for exactly what it is. A symptom of the war, a signal that the enemy knows where your wall is weakest. Put down the scroll, pick up the sword. If you're taking that challenge, I want to hear from you. Drop it in the comments. What are you fasting from for the next 24 hours? Name it, because naming it is the first act of war. And subscribe, because next week we keep building.